Chers invités, mesdames et messieurs, nous avons le plaisir de commencer cet après-midi avec une présentation sur l'eau, l'importance de l'eau et le message qu'elle nous apporte pour la paix et l'harmonie dans notre vie. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to begin this afternoon's session with a presentation entitled Message from Water, Restoring World Peace and Harmony. The presentation will be given by Ms. Kelly No, whom I would like to invite onto the platform to give her address. Ms. No.
Your Excellencies, respected faith leaders, venerable masters, distinguished guests and speakers, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. "36 years ago, in the midst of the night, a young couple fled war with about 350 others on a small fishing boat no more than 24 meters long. After 5 nights and 6 days, they chanced on an island in another Asian country. But happiness soon turned into fear because the island's residents tried to chase them away and turn the boat around. But on that day, 2 miracles happened. First, heavy rain all of a sudden started pouring down, and everyone ran onto the island, scattering in different directions. Second, there were some United Nations officers who happened to be there reporting on human rights. The young couple I'm talking about is my parents, and if it weren't for the United Nations, I wouldn't be here today. Not long after, several Catholic and Christian churches from the small town of Blenheim in New Zealand opened their hearts to those of a completely different cultural and religious background. Together, they sponsored several refugees, including my parents, to a new homeland. This is a photograph of my parents taken by the local newspaper when they first arrived in Blenheim in New Zealand. That's my mother in the centre with Mrs. Tilly Van Dyke, one of the sponsors, my father on the right, and my uncle and late grandmother on the left. My parents arrived that day with nothing but the clothes that they wore and hope for a life of peace. Like sons and daughters, they were welcomed with a love, overcoming artificial distinctions of nationality, culture, and religion. For my family and I, intercultural and interfaith harmony has been the path to peace. There's an old saying that goes, "Be careful of your thoughts, for your thoughts become your words. Be careful of your words, for your words become your actions. Be careful of your actions, for your actions become your habits. Be careful of your habits, for your habits become your character. Be careful of your character, for your character becomes your destiny." And as the Roman philosopher Cicero once said, "Within the character of the citizen lies the welfare of the nation." So it all starts from our thoughts. The question is, do we know the impact of our thoughts? Like laying down bricks along a road, every thought reinforces the path to happiness or suffering, conflict or peace. In other words, we see the crises and challenges that confront our world today, but what can we do to help? The key is our thoughts. Our thoughts are known by the world around us. And today I'm delighted to share with you some scientific evidence that water knows our thoughts. We'll begin with a bit of background and a bit about the process involved, and then broadly look at three themes. What water knows about our thoughts on the natural environment, our human environment, and the path to peace. So first, a bit of background and the process involved. Well, back in the 1990s, Dr. Masaru Emoto started studying water by freezing droplets and taking photographs of the ice crystals. In 2005, he presented his international research at the United Nations headquarters in New York. His groundbreaking discoveries have formed the basis of several international best-selling books. And inspired by Dr. Emoto's experiments, the independent and not-for-profit Huaiyan Water Research Laboratory have been studying water since 2010, with the aim of providing fresh perspectives for our efforts for peace. Now, having independently verified Dr. Emoto's findings, Huaiyan Water Research have gone on to further explore how water responds to a broad range of information, from text and images to smells and sounds. Now, in terms of the process, sterile distilled water is exposed to information in a closed, isolated environment, unless otherwise required by the particular study. Here, for example, is one of the soundproof boxes that they use. And in the top photo, we can see how water is exposed to an image, in this case, a photograph, that's attached to the transparent container of the water sample. And in the photograph below, how water is exposed to audio information. After that, water is then frozen as individual droplets on petri dishes, each containing about half a cubic centimetre of water. And then a person blinded to the intervention then observes the frozen droplets under a high-speed imaging microscope that records the ice crystals by video and photograph. So, in the absence of any intervention at all, here is a photo of an ice crystal formed from sterile distilled water, as I mentioned before, and this is without any intervention at all. Now, I mentioned before that water is exposed to a broad range of information. Now, the following slide is an example of how water's response to the written word. This ice crystal was formed from water that was shown the words, "I love you." The video was recorded by the microscope, and the whole process is over in a matter of seconds because the frozen droplets tend to melt very quickly. Water is exposed to the relevant words by sticking the text onto the transparent container of the water sample, much like the photo that we saw in the soundproof box before. On the right is water's response to the words, "I hate you." Now, what about when when the words are expressed using a different language? Well, this is the view from under the microscope. When water is exposed to "I hate you," written in the languages of, going alphabetically, that's Arabic in the top right, Arabic in the top left, Chinese in the top right, English in the bottom left, and French in the bottom right. It's hard to believe, but the shapes of the ice crystals were fragmented like this to begin with, even before it melted. Now, after the water was shown the word "love," written in different languages, again in alphabetical order, we have French in the top left, Korean in the top right, Persian in the bottom left, and Russian in the bottom right. compared to the previous images, these all look stunning. Just like a smile on any face brings happiness to others anywhere in the world. And speaking of smiles, Water was shown this photograph of a baby smile. Isn't it gorgeous? And here, it actually looks like the smile is reflected at the bottom of the ice crystal. If you can see there along the bottom. And we even have a video. In the next slide, water was separately exposed to the words envy on the left and admiration on the right. Really goes to show the impact of one frame of mind in how we respond to a positive result around us. And here, the words thank you on the left and it is all your fault on the right. So we've seen how water responds to some text and a photograph. They also exposed water to different music. So first let's have a listen to what water listened to. And this is what the water looked like. Now, if we changed channels.
Me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
There's quite a different result. Now, besides text, photographs, and music, water was exposed to audiovisual media, like this documentary here on atomic bombings. The image on the left-hand side is actually a screenshot from the documentary. And interestingly, they also found that water responds differently to different smells, like the smell of fresh flowers and decomposing cabbage. As we can probably start to see, different information evokes quite a different response from water, as shown by the ice crystals. Over countless experiments, the Hawaiian Water Research Laboratory have found that regardless of the format or the language, information associated with positive thoughts, like love and gratitude, generally result in ice crystals that are more complete, brighter, and relatively ordered with regular shapes and lines. And this is compared to information associated with not so positive thoughts, like hatred and conflict. You could say water knows the difference. Over 2,500 years ago, the Buddha taught that everything arises from our minds. With our thoughts, we make the world, and the whole universe is aware of our every thought. Like the reflection, in other words, everything, including the inanimate matter around us, senses our thoughts. Like the reflection of our thoughts in the ice crystals, every particle of matter feels our thoughts from the moment each thought arises and changes accordingly. Just like tugging a hair in our body, one fine, tiny strand of hair is really nothing compared to the rest of our body. Yet, when we pull on it, the whole body feels a discomfort. And so this helps us understand how even our slightest thought is instantly felt by the whole universe. The consequences of our thoughts and actions are global, particularly when we look at issues like climate change. As the lifeblood of our environment, water has been with us for as long as we can remember. In fact, water actually makes up about 70% of the adult human body, even higher in infants, and covers about 70% of the Earth's surface. Sort of makes us wonder what our thoughts are doing to the water in our cells right now. Or the cells in the matter around us. Would we want the water in our bodies to look like the left or the right? In a way, we've all experienced how negative emotions like stress and wear us out, translating into headaches, fatigue, and pains. If our thoughts are looking like the right all the time, how could our health not suffer? Now, how do we want the water on our planet to look like? In this next section, let's take a look at what water knows about our thoughts on the natural environment. They exposed water to this photograph of the natural landscape. Looking at this, it's no wonder that taking a walk in the park always feels refreshing. Water was also shown other images where nature has been altered in various ways. For example, they had water take a look at this photograph of deforestation. As we may know, forest areas the size of Panama are lost each and every year. Here, water was also shown a photograph of a tranquil forest. After water was shown a documentary on city pollution, the ice crystals looked like this. Probably best not to go swimming there. Now, it's important to remember that what we're looking at on the right is still sterile distilled water. Only the stimulus is different. Water was also shown a photograph of clearer waters. Looking at the image on the left makes me feel like taking a holiday. As many parts of the world are experiencing an increase in average temperatures, water was shown some footage of melting glaciers. You could say these frozen water crystals help us see these global symptoms from a new perspective. Now, these images are from a documentary on cattle farming. Without a sprig of grass, the cattle have to eat feed designed for rapid growth that is neither chemical-free nor organic. And water's response? The distorted look of the ice crystals perhaps reflects our being at odds with the natural environment and further away from the path to peace. Water was also shown a different documentary, this time about the British primatologist Dr. Jane Goodall. Dame Goodall is a world expert on chimpanzees, best known for her 55-year study on chimpanzees in the wild at Tanzania's Gombe Stream National Park. As a United Nations messenger of peace, Dr. Jane Goodall encourages us all to have a love for all beings, to make the world a better place for people, animals, and the environment that we all share. In late August 2005, Hurricane Katrina caused terrible destruction along the Gulf Coast of the United States. And this is an ice crystal formed from water that was shown footage of the hurricane. A little bit more recently, in March 2011, tsunami waves devastated northeastern Japan, and this was water's response after being shown news footage of the tsunami. These disasters really break our hearts. Under the most challenging of conditions, to me, this photograph exemplifies the strength of hope as rescuers and disaster response teams work around the clock to try to save lives. Again, we see that water responds very differently to different information. Information arises from our thoughts, which in turn create words like I love you and thank you, words as well as pictures, as well as actions, which in turn create pictures like the one we have here, music and movies. Positive thoughts generally translate into more complete, brighter, and relatively ordered ice crystal shapes. With our thoughts, we make the world for better or worse. And water seems to be telling us quite graphically that to progress along the path to peace, we can't go without living in harmony with the natural environment that we all share. Now, let's take a look at what water knows about the people side of things. The following video is an ice crystal formed from water exposed to the word greed. As you can see, the shape of the ice crystals is as fragmented as it looks to begin with, and the changes are so subtle they're hardly noticeable at all. Many would say that the word greed neatly sums up the complexity of causes that brought about the 2008 financial crisis. When water was shown a news report about the financial crisis,
we had 150 billion bonds go bankrupt today with Lehman, multiples of that in synthetic.
The ice crystals turned out like this. A time of anguish, stress, and pain around the world. Many large, long-standing companies collapsed. Millions of jobs were lost. And amongst other things, savings and investments evaporated overnight. As we know, greed inevitably leads to conflict. And under extreme circumstances, even warfare. And here, water was shown documentary footage of warfare. The image that you can see on the left is a screenshot from the documentary. These ice crystals were formed after water was separately exposed to the words conflict and reconciliation. Believe it or not, reconciliation and peace can happen in the space of one thought. It reminds me of a good story that tells us about the power of our thoughts. There was once a young barber known for providing the best haircuts in town. A governor heard about his skill and called him in for a haircut. Well, meeting such an important person for the very first time, the poor barber was extremely nervous. His hands were really shaky, and when the governor fell asleep during the haircut, he accidentally shaved off a part of an eyebrow. He was extremely worried. He didn't know what to do. He could well lose his job. So when the governor woke up, the barber politely asked, "Sir, I've never met a governor before. Is it true what they say, that governors have a heart as big as the ocean?" The governor looked at the young barber and laughed. "No, young man, that's just a metaphor. It means that a person in a position of power must be kind and forgiving." Much relieved to hear this, the young man, the barber, responded, "Well, really glad to hear this, Governor, because, look, I'm terribly sorry. I've accidentally shaved off a part of your eyebrow." The governor took one look in the mirror and nearly exploded with rage at such carelessness. But in one thought, that instant, he immediately remembered his own words. A person in a position of power must be kind and forgiving. In the space of one thought, he put himself into the shoes of the young man, and his anger changed to forgiveness. Incidentally, these ice crystals were formed after water was shown separately exposed to the words anger on the left and forgiveness on the right. The result was immediate, reconciliation for both. So the governor and the barber parted ways peacefully that day, and the governor remained a long-term customer, eyebrows intact. That was peace in the space of one thought. We can see the contrast between the shapes, between anger and forgiveness. So we can imagine how the water in their cells would have been looking like. And this is water's response to the words, "I'm sorry, and please forgive me." As the story shows, our day-to-day experiences offer countless opportunities to be more aware of our thoughts and renew our commitment to peace and harmony. And this is water's response to the word peace and harmony. As a world of peace is created from our thoughts, there's no other way to build peace but to build peace in the minds of men and women, as UNESCO well knows. Of course, this is easier said than done, because particularly today we have a culture of distraction, as Nobel Peace Prize winner Al Gore describes. Let's now take a look at what water knows about our current distractions. Well, interestingly, the Huaiyan Water Research Laboratory have exposed water to entertainment that millions of people around the world tune into. What we watch or tune into influences what we think, say, and do, which directly affects the people around us and ultimately our global village. For example, water was shown a popular reality TV show involving contestants living in a house together, and this was the result. Now, studies published in Pediatrics, that's the Journal of the American Academy of Pediatricians and the American Journal of Preventive Medicine, have found that sexual content in music and television is associated with early onset of sexual behavior in teenagers aged 12 to 17 who tune in. In fact, the more such content is viewed on television, the earlier sexual activity started. And this is important because early sexual activity has a direct relationship with sexually transmitted infections like AIDS and chlamydia, and also unplanned teenage pregnancy, and both are global problems. On violence, the research is also clear. The American National Institute of Mental Health reported that children who watch violence on television are more likely to be aggressive, harm others, be more fearful of the world around them, and less likely to empathize. After water was exposed to a televised mixed martial arts fighting championship, the ice crystals turned out like this.
Look at that spam to the head. One punch, two.
Believe it or not, this television program is broadcasted in over 129 countries and territories to over 800 million TV households around the world in 28 different languages. In 2000, 6 medical and public health professional organizations across the United States issued a joint statement on the impact of entertainment violence on children, highlighting these issues. And in particular, high levels of violent video game exposure have been linked to delinquency, fighting at school, and violent criminal behavior, including assault and robbery. These associations are particularly concerning given that so many around the world play computer games, video games, and many of the top-selling video games are violent. Let's take a look at 2 ice crystals from water that was separately exposed to 2 different violent video games. And these are international top bestsellers across multiple platforms. The one on the left involves players taking on the role of a warfighter trying to destroy an enemy. And the other is described as an action-adventure game with the player taking on a series of missions to carry out crimes such as shooting and theft. Ultimately, we do have a choice in whether we tune in or play or not. Now, looking at a more positive genre of audiovisual media, they exposed water to the 1965 musical film Sound of Music.
The hills are alive with the sound of music, with songs they have sung for a...
Guess it doesn't get more positive than a musical. The Sound of Music is about an Austrian governess who brings love and music to a family of 7 children. Children bring the family close together. And it teaches about creating happiness in the lives of the people around us, with evidently quite a different response from water. Now here on the left, we have an ice crystal formed after water was exposed to the Chinese word sha sheng, which means to kill or harm living beings. And on the right is water's response to the opposite meaning, no harm to living beings ever. When faced with violence and reality, this ice crystal was formed from a water sample that had been located at a slaughterhouse, an animal slaughterhouse. And the one on the right is formed from the same water sample, with the only difference being having Buddhist meditation dedicated to the water sample from a separate location. Now it really goes to show the power of the incredible transformative power of all of our religious teachings, as well as the power of our thoughts. You could say that distractions have been with us since the beginning of time. They've just been amplified by modern technology, with all the different devices and screens that seek our attention throughout the day, from our smartphones to the television screens on public transport. As we've seen from the water crystals, we really can't afford to be distracted from peace and harmony. The British historian Arnold Toynbee once observed that out of 21 notable civilizations, 19 perished, not from conquest without, but from moral decay within. So what do we need? As UNESCO knows, education. Particularly the education that enables us to live together in peace and harmony. And as for the way forward, the studies on water validate what all of us in this room already know. In thinking about such education, the world's religions and the traditional cultures of our ethnic groups saves us from reinventing the wheel. Now these are ice crystals after water was separately exposed to written extracts from the teachings of 10 religions. When we think about it, our moral values are essentially the same wherever we come from, and have been the same for thousands of years. Values that were applicable then are still applicable now because human nature has not changed. No matter where we come from, everyone still appreciates kindness and compassion. And here are 10 religions in alphabetical order.
Love is patient, kind, without envy. It is not boastful or arrogant. It is not ill-mannered, nor does it seek its own interest. Love overcomes anger and forgets offences.
From the teachings of Anglicanism, First Book of Corinthians, chapter 13, verses 4 to 5 from the Holy Bible.
He should be content with little and be free from all inordinate desire.
From the teachings of the Baha'i Faith, gleanings from the writings of Baha'u'llah.
Regard all sentient beings as oneself.
From the teachings of Buddhism, chapter 2 of the Infinite Life Sutra.
Now I give you a new commandment. Love one another, just as I have loved you. You also must love one another.
From the teachings of Catholicism, Gospel of John, chapter 13, verse 34, from the Holy Bible.
With a noble soul, one devotes himself to bring happiness and peace to others, including those who once hurt him.
From the teachings of Hinduism, the laws of Manu.
Help the enemies regain friendship, for this is better than saying a faithful prayer.
From the teachings of Islam, the Holy Quran.
Let love and compassion never leave you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart.
From the teachings of Judaism, the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verse 3, from the Holy Bible.
Make wisdom thy mother, contentment thy father, and truthfulness thy brother. These are thine good relations.
From the teachings of Sikhism.
Be supportive of widows and orphans. Be respectful to elders and care for youth.
From the teachings of Taoism.
We should love others as we love ourselves.
From the teachings of Zoroastrianism. And these are the 10 crystals again, side by side. There were similar results after water was exposed to the sounds of meditation and prayer, like the Catholic Rosary, for example. And also after water was shown the emblems of the 10 religions. As the teachings of all religions are centered on unconditional love, loving others as we love ourselves, we can think of them as brothers and sisters of the same family. And this photo was taken here at UNESCO back in 2006 at the celebration of VESAK. 9 of the world's religions joined hands together to pray for world peace. And after water was shown the photo, as Mahatma Gandhi once said, the essence of all religions is one, only their approaches are different. Religious teachings through art, music, and sculpture enrich our lives with a selfless, compassionate perspective and help us reinforce positive thinking. All the founders of the world's religions were volunteers. They taught for free to anyone who wished to learn about loving kindness and compassion. To me, the bright and beautiful results for all of these religions reflect their common value of unconditional love, loving others as we love ourselves. And at the same time, it underlines the importance of learning the teachings of different faiths for interfaith harmony as a cornerstone for world peace. And I'm delighted to share with you 2 images from Toowoomba. As we've heard, Toowoomba is Australia's 2nd largest inland city, committed to being a model multicultural city of peace and harmony. And as we may know, it's home to over 80 different ethnic groups. There are over 100 languages spoken and more than 10 religions. On the right is a photo taken at their regular peace education forums, promoting dialogue and exchange among Toowoomba's various religions and the local residents. The 2 ice crystals we can see was formed after water was separately exposed to the two pictures. In a way, Toowoomba reminds me of Blenheim in New Zealand. Over 30 years ago, when my parents first settled in Blenheim, they were part of a community that learned and lived their respective Catholic and Christian traditions. And people could just go out to the shops without locking their doors. Home security would be just a simple single lock on the front and back doors. And there'd be fresh farm produce left by the roadside, marked with prices. Buyers would help themselves, put their monies into a bucket to be collected at the end of the day. Even in the capital city of Wellington, where I grew up, windows didn't need grills. And I still remember a time when cars were sold without security alarm systems, just the car key. The trust and sense of security is perhaps just one of the benefits of living in a community strengthened by moral education. Apart from religious teachings, the traditional cultures of the world's ethnic groups help us navigate our way along the path to peace, like a moral compass. My friends at the Huaiyan Water Research Laboratory have exposed water to the 12 virtues of Chinese traditional culture. The world's traditional cultures offers teachings from the wisdom of sages throughout history and around the world, including our forefathers who've gone further along the path of life. My colleagues, teacher Tsai and Ms. Chen, spoke to us about China's traditional culture just before lunchtime. So for this part, I just want to share with you a little bit about traditional Chinese culture, which is based on these 12 universal virtues. These ice crystals reflect water's response to the 12 virtues as written text. So going from left to right, the virtues are honouring parents, love between siblings, loyalty, trust, courtesy, honour, integrity, shamefulness, benevolence, love, peace, and harmony. Having grown up in a non-Chinese environment, I used to wonder why these virtues were so important. You see, for thousands of years, the behaviour of a single individual in ancient China could bring disrepute, financial ruin, and criminal sanctions for their entire extended family, including even their teachers. So families in ancient China placed tremendous importance on the moral education of their members. These days, we might think of traditional as being obsolete or outdated, but the reality is that such traditional culture has never been more relevant. Take, for example, the first and foremost virtue of honouring parents. And here again is water's response to those words. At its most basic level, this virtue involves loving, respecting, and supporting our parents. When you think about it, our parents were probably the first to show us what love really means. All of us arrive in this world with absolutely nothing, not even an instruction manual. And yet our parents love us enough to teach and care for us when we need it the most. And here is water's response to this photograph of a mother teaching her child. Even in those stressful times, as any parent knows, the crystals turn out beautifully because parents are selflessly helping their children be the best that they can be. And there's also another photo that water was shown of a mother feeding her child. Our parents go without sleep, as new parents do. They put up with us in sickness and even before toilet training. Let's now take a look at this photo. It's a photograph of father and son, and the roles seem reversed. One of the ice crystals was actually fragmented to begin with, but over the course of a few seconds, the parts merged together, as we can see along the bottom here, as if father and son, separated by living apart or mental impairment, are reunited. And the son is able to repay the great kindness of his father by looking after him. In a broader sense, the virtue of honouring parents means not only loving and respecting our parents, but remembering all those who've gone before and living in service of those to come. So how do we keep this important virtue in mind? Well, in traditional Chinese culture, ancestral remembrance services held 2 to 3 times a year help remind us of our forefathers. Last year, I attended such a service in Hong Kong, along with about 7,000 other people and a few water samples. So it goes something like this. And this is how the water turned out. To me, the multi-layered shape of the ice crystal reflects generations past and present. When I looked up at the backdrop of the memorial tablets, you can see sort of pinkish along the back of those photographs. It made me realize I wasn't there just to commemorate the historical contributions of our family ancestors. You see, families are the cells of our society, of our countries. So our forefathers collectively represent all of society. Without them, we wouldn't be here today. The remembrance services are literal reminders to reflect on our roots and cherish the heritage of time-honoured teachings that help keep our thoughts on the right track in all that we do. China's traditional culture is actually quite unique in that there are comprehensive records of the collective wisdom passed down throughout thousands of generations. It's got everything from how to go about governance, leadership, education, economy, to public health. And it's all covered in incredible detail, including even the factors to consider in determining the appropriate job remuneration. And this is exemplified in the complete library of the 4 branches of literature, as we saw in the little video just before lunchtime. And also the compilation of the governing principles of ancient China, which Professor Liu and teacher Tsai talked about. You can see in the screen here, the governing principles of ancient China has actually been translated into several languages. Now, for example, the governing principles of ancient China states that good leaders will love the people as if they were their own children and care for them as if they were their own kindred. In a corporate environment, as we heard on Wednesday, Suzhou Good Arc Electronics has put such moral teachings at the heart of its management. It's a publicly listed company responsible for 10% of the worldwide output of semiconductors, but it feels like one big family. That's their logo there. Its 2,300 employees are respected and trusted as family members, and they no longer need to clock in and out. The working week has been reduced from 6 days to 5 to allow an extra day for learning to practice the virtues. And unlike companies that place profit-making as their number one goal, Good Arc prioritizes the moral development and welfare of its employees. And the company has not seen better days. Staff turnover rate declined from over 20% in 2006 to less than 7% in 2013. Suzhou Good Arc's market value and annual profit have increased ever since. Now, I've mentioned that the teachings of traditional Chinese culture are well recorded and applicable throughout all aspects of society, from education to government. How to practice the 12 universal virtues is concisely encapsulated in this book, The Guidelines for Being a Good Person, as mentioned by my colleague Ms. Chen before lunch. It was put together as a children's text to practicing living the 12 universal virtues. And what we see here is an English translation of the original Chinese classic written in the 1600s as a foundational summary of the Confucian wisdom. And here is what happened after Walter listened to a student reading from The Guidelines for Being a Good Person.
If someone asks us to do something and we are not sure whether it is appropriate, we should not carelessly promise. If we do promise to do something and it is inappropriate, we will be wrong whether we keep or break our promise.
The Guidelines for Being a Good Person have actually been translated into several languages, and since 2014, they formed a part of the national curriculum across all schools in Indonesia. The guidelines are also taught by volunteers in many other parts of the world, including Australia, China, and Malaysia, because the moral principles and the virtues are universally applicable. In terms of the bigger picture, when the town of Tangchi in China's Anhui province studied the Guidelines for Being a a good person, putting the virtues into practice, they experience greater harmony within families, love and respectfulness among young and old, throughout the community. And for the town's population of 48,000, this translated into considerable reductions in the rates of divorce and crime. And in fact, the divorce rate was reduced by 50%, and the crime rate during that time became precisely nil. Now, we don't even need to speak Chinese to benefit from practicing the virtues. Case in point is Japan Airlines. You might remember Japan Airlines was bankrupt with debt of $25 billion back in 2010. The practice of traditional culture helped the airline fly again by uniting its employees with the universal virtues. Within just 1 year of bankruptcy, the airline generated annual operating profits of $1.5 billion. Now, tasked with the revival of Japan Airlines was Dr. Katsuo Inomori, one of the world's most respected businessmen with a net worth of $1.1 billion. He identified the power of thought and emphasized moral education. Dr. Inomori emphasizes the development of strong moral character among the employees and realigned the company objective as being the material and intellectual growth of employees first and foremost. Dr. Inomori has said that in times of difficulty, whether in work or in life, he always goes back to the fundamentals, asking himself, what is the right thing to do as a human being? Such corporate leadership and management might sound a little bit different, but it shows that the universal virtues continue to be effective to this day. The guidelines for being a good person on the left and the governing principles of ancient China on the right are just two texts from the treasury of China's traditional culture. Both books are generally available online and also in hard copies free of charge, and they provide clear, concise guidelines for living the universal virtues and keeping our minds on the path to peace. As what has shown us, moral education from traditional culture is just one example of the wealth of wisdom out there. It equips our toolkit for tackling the problems of economy, ecology, and equity. In looking at the teachings of our religions or traditional cultures, from the perspective of water, it's not an issue between new and old or religious and secular, but being open to a broad range of solutions so that we can innovate for the solutions that we need. As Einstein once said, we can't solve problems by using the same thinking we used when we created them. In all the teachings, the basic litmus test of whether we've thought and acted as we should is whether we were thinking about benefiting others at the particular time. You could say that the best thoughts to have are thoughts that are purely for others, selfless thoughts, thoughts of unconditional love. And speaking of which, when water was shown the words unconditional love, isn't it beautiful? These virtues, all 12 of the virtues of traditional Chinese culture, to me, are exemplified by the late Teresa Zhu, Singapore's humanitarian and supercentenarian, otherwise known as Singapore's Mother Teresa. Teresa passed away aged 113 back in 2011. Every day she'd wake up at about 4 a.m. and spend the whole day serving the poor and the elderly in Singapore. On her philosophy, she once said, "The world is my home. All living beings are my brothers and sisters. Selfless service is my religion." She devoted her whole life to serving the poor, the needy, the ill, and the abandoned. Even her final days in Singapore were kept busy serving senior citizens much younger than herself. Teresa showed me that we can enjoy better health, perhaps even longevity, and more positive interactions with others just by thinking purely for others and serving our fellow beings with unconditional love. Looking and feeling our best starts from thinking the best thoughts. Now, the studies on water by the Hawaiian Water Research, put together in this complementary book, offer scientific evidence that our thoughts affect the matter around us. From a fresh perspective, water's helped us identify the positive and not so positive in our natural and human environments. As a world of peace and harmony starts from our minds, we can't go without addressing our thoughts and values. And water has shown us that we already have answers in the moral teachings of our religions and traditional cultures. They just need to be broadcasted to promote those messages of love so that we can all move towards the positive. Like the Buddha once upon a time, we need to awaken now to accentuate the positive. After all, as a voice once put it so beautifully,
what the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of.
After all, this is what is at stake. Our earth, our home, ourselves. We're one. Together, we can heal the world and make it a better place. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. 谢谢大家.